The parliament not only has lawmaking functions but also has other functions such as executive functions, electoral functions, judicial functions, and constitution amending functions. We know that India has a parliamentary system, and we have studied that in a parliamentary system or in a parliamentary form of government, there is no separation of power. Therefore, the legislature is not totally separate from the executive, which is why certain executive functions are also given to the legislature. You might have noticed that the Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers are also a part of the legislature. And you know that these people also make up the executive. So as we can see that these members are a part of both the legislature and the executive. So the first kind of powers or functions of the legislature that we learn is administrative powers. Administrative powers are also known as executive powers because these are concerned with the control and keeping a check on the executive. The members of the parliament can pose questions and finally vote out the executive if they do not have the vote of the majority of the members of the parliament. This is how the legislature manages to keep a control on the executive branch. So there are various methods through which this is done. Let us now go into the methods. The first method to do this is via the question hour. So the first hour of sitting in both of the houses, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, is known as the question hour. During these times, the members of parliament can ask questions and get them answered by the ministers. So, the representatives of the public or the citizens of India can ask questions of public importance and have them answered by the ministers who are responsible for their various ministries. So, the ministers can be asked questions regarding their ministries, responsibilities, and to obtain information on matters of public importance. Through this asking of questions, which is known as interpellation, the legislature keeps a check on the executive. When the ministers know that they can be asked questions regarding their functions, they tend to be more aware of their duties and perform their duties more responsibly. The second method is through an adjournment motion. An adjournment motion can be passed only in the Lok Sabha. When an adjournment motion is passed, it stops or pauses the normal business of the House because it is presented without any prior notice. This motion helps in pointing out the mistakes and the shortcomings of the ministers. So, via this adjournment motion, the failures of the executive can be brought to light. Hence, this is a motion which keeps a check on the working of the executive by the parliament. The third motion that we will be studying is the censure motion. To censure someone means to condemn someone or to harshly criticize someone. So by passing the censure motion, the parliament draws attention to a specific policy or law that has been passed by the current government. The censure motion can be tabled by the members of parliament to criticize a particular government policy by a single minister or by the entire ministry, that is the government, and that is known as a censure motion. Just like the no confidence motion, the censure motion can be also passed only in the Lok Sabha. But there is a great difference between the no confidence motion and the censure motion. The no confidence motion, when passed, there has to be no reason given for the raising of this motion. But when a censure motion is passed, it is necessary to give a specific reason of why it is being passed. When the censure motion is passed against a single minister, there is no threat of that minister having to vacate his office. But if it is passed against a law which has been made by the entire Council of Ministers, then the Council of Ministers have to go and ask for the confidence of the House, because otherwise they will be dissolved. So now let us take an example of a censure motion. This is the BJP MP Pragya Thakur. She had said some not so good things about the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. A censure motion was tabled against her by 50 MPs asking her to apologize for insulting the father of the nation. This brings us to the vote of no confidence or the no confidence motion. So what is the no confidence motion or the vote of no confidence? If the government in power fails to abide by the laws of the Constitution or disregards the provisions that are mentioned in the Constitution, the government can be voted out by passing of the no confidence motion against the Prime Minister and his cabinet. In other words, if the government fails to run the administration properly or doesn't carry out its responsibilities efficiently, then the parliament may vote out the government. Basically, it means that the public of India who are represented through their elected representatives have to support the government for it to stay in power. When the public of India who are represented through their elected representatives in the Lok Sabha lose their faith or trust in the government, then they might pass a no confidence motion through which the present government has to resign or they are dissolved. Have you ever heard the phrase, the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister swim and sink together? This means that the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha, which means that if a good law has been passed, then the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister are complemented together. But if there is a motion of no confidence, then the Prime Minister along with his Council of Ministers will be dissolved. Calculating the budget, that is how much money comes in and how much money goes out, is every family's story. If your family realizes that the budget that they have made exceeds the budget that should be there, what does your family do? They decide to cut down their budget and to spend their money only on the necessary items. They have to reduce their money spending on certain avenues. But beware, your pocket money can also be cut. Just like that, even in the parliament, when the budget is presented, the parliament may feel that the budget has to be cut down. So, during this time, the parliament passes cut motions and cuts down the budget. Sometimes, even the salaries of the ministers might be reduced or cut down to accommodate their spending in other avenues. For example, during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, the government realized that more money was needed for meeting the necessities arising out of the pandemic. Hence, they passed the Salaries and Allowances Bill, which proposed cutting down the salaries of the MPs by 30% for 1 year. That is till April 2021. We have already studied about the Constitution. Do you remember if India has a written constitution or an unwritten constitution? Yes, India has a written constitution. It is the lengthiest constitution in the world. Our constitution includes in itself the details of all the powers of the legislative, executive and the judiciary. But it has been many years since this constitution has been made. So, if we follow everything line by line of this constitution, then this does not work in our times, as a lot of changes have happened throughout these years. Thus, to reflect the reality and necessity of the day, the constitution needs to be changed sometimes. These changes are known as amendments. For example, do you know that when the constitution came into existence, the voting age was set at 21 years. But today we know that it is 18 years. Because we understood that the youth of today is more aware and more literate and therefore should be represented in the parliament. But who makes these changes? Who decides if these changes should be introduced? Well, again, it is the parliament. The parliament is empowered to make changes in the Constitution of India. These proposals for making an amendment in the constitution can be initiated in either of the houses of the parliament, the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. But our constitution is a very well thought out work. The framers of our constitution had worked very hard and put in all the details that will reflect the essence of what makes India, India. So, there cannot be any random changes in the constitution because of someone's selfish needs and demands. So, for an amendment to be passed, it has to be passed by the majority of the total membership of the House as well as 2/3 of the members present and voting in both of the houses. But there are some other more sensitive issues which have been going on since the time of independence and are very important to preserve. So for these special matters, after the normal procedure for amendment, the state legislatures also have to pass it by at least half of its members. Now the parliament also has some electoral functions. Who does the parliament elect? The parliament elects the president, the vice president, the speaker and the deputy speaker of Lok Sabha and the deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha. So firstly, the parliament elects the president. The president is obviously not elected in a direct election like the prime minister or the chief minister is elected. The president is thus elected by an electoral college which is formed out of the members of Lok Sabha, the members of Rajya Sabha and the members of the legislative assemblies of the states. So all of them together make up an electoral college which elects the President of India. In the election of the Vice President of India, the members of the state legislative assemblies are not present. So the Vice President of India is elected by an electoral college which is formed out of the two houses of the parliament. So members of the Lok Sabha and members of the Rajya Sabha come together to form an electoral college and elect the Vice President of India. Other than the President and the Vice President, from within the House itself, in the Lok Sabha, the members of the Lok Sabha elect their Speaker and they also elect their Deputy Speaker. Similarly, in the Rajya Sabha then, the Chairman and the Deputy Chairman should be chosen. But the ex officio Chairman of the Rajya Sabha is the Vice President of India, which means that the Vice President of India, by virtue of him being the Vice President, becomes the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. So there needs to be an election only for the Deputy Chairman. So the Parliament chooses the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker and the Deputy Chairman. Here we have Ganesh Vasudev Mavalankar was the first Speaker of the Lok Sabha. M.A. Iyengar, the first Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha. And S.V. Krishnamurthy Rao was the first Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Other than these electoral powers, the Parliament also has some judicial powers. So the first one out of these is the removal of the President by impeachment. You know that the Prime Minister can be removed by a vote of no confidence. So let us now understand how a President can be removed. So the President can be removed from his position by impeachment. Let us understand the process of impeachment that we follow in India. So for the impeachment of the President in India, the impeachment charges can be initiated in either house of parliament, that is the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Now, if these charges are initiated in the Lok Sabha, then it has to be first passed by 2/3 majority of the Lok Sabha. Then it comes to the Rajya Sabha, who investigates these charges. And after investigating these charges, if the Rajya Sabha finds the president guilty, then they also pass it by 2/3 majority. And then the president stands impeached. Similarly, if the Rajya Sabha initiates the impeachment charges, it is passed by 2/3 majority of the Rajya Sabha and reaches the Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha now investigates these charges, and if found guilty, they pass it by a 2/3 majority and the president stands impeached. The judicial power of the parliament also extends to the removal of the vice president, the auditor general, the judges of the Supreme Court and high courts, and also other high federal officers. But in India, there has been no impeachment of the president or removal of the vice president yet. The first judge against whom these removal proceedings were initiated in independent India is V. Ramaswamy. If the members of the parliament engage in wrongdoings such as bribery, corruption, fraud or exploitation, then these members can be punished by the parliament. So, this falls under the punitive powers of the parliament. Punitive means punishing. So, when an MP misuses his legislative powers or disregards the house, then the parliament has the power to punish this MP. So, in this video, we have talked about the various functions of the parliament. We learnt about the executive powers, which include the question hour, the passing of the no confidence motion, adjournment motion and censure motion. We talked about the constituent powers, that the parliament has the power to make amendments in the constitution. We also talked about the parliament's electoral powers, that is, the parliament can elect the president, the vice president, the speaker of the Lok Sabha, the deputy speaker of the Lok Sabha and the deputy chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Lastly, we understood the judicial functions of the parliament, which includes the impeachment of the president, the removal of high federal officers and also the punishments that the parliament can give. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.